Is my screen clear to you, Ishika?
Yes.
Perfect. So we're going to go through the employee relations unit, which is the unit 31, and going to go through LO1 today. If you have any doubts throughout this lecture, just stop me immediately and I will be happy to answer them. Just come up with discussions. If you feel I'm going too quick, just let me know as well. I have a couple of examples listed down and a video that I'm going to show you. And there's a lot of information that we're going to go through, but the information is a little repetitive as well. So it'll be fairly quicker than, going through every bit. You'll understand what I'm talking about later on because there are simpler things that we're going through.
Okay.
So for LO1, basically what we're doing is we are analyzing how the changes and development in the society, the work context and employment have influenced employee relations. So when you think of employee relations, what comes up to your head? Do you have any idea?
Mm, the relationship between the manager and employees.
Kind of, yeah. That's very good because that is what it is. So it's just, in relationship between basically the manager or the person who, the employer basically, and the employee. That's literally how it is. And while in HR, what we're looking at is how we can build a more positive relationship between that. So, how you can have a better relationship with your managers or your employers, basically, and also how you can have a balance between them. So, it's not always just listening to the managers, but also listening to the employee. So that would essentially mean how to maintain a good relationship between both of them. And it's so sometimes there are few employers who have been so, it's like a dictatorship kind of rule. I'm not trying to say rule, but the management style is a dictatorship management style. So that wouldn't be the best employee relations because at that point the employees are just scared, that all right, one wrong move and he's probably going to just remove us out of the job. One wrong move and it's going to hamper our future. So how can we maintain a harmonious relationship between both of these parties is what HR looks like. And what we're going to focus on today is how outside changes or developments in the society basically have influenced that relationship because of some outside developments, um employees start pressurizing employees more, or it's vice versa. So how does that affect the overall relationship in general? um all right, so basically I'm going to skim through all of this information because it's an introduction which I was basically talking about. So it says that how line managers are basically responsible for implementing employee relationship strategies, right? Your managers are the ones who put in different things in place and come up with a proper plan that, all right, this is how we're going to manage our employees. Or, for example, if I spoke about in the previous module, we spoke about how there are different interviews that are conducted with employees to understand how or, you know, how are they feeling about a specific situation. For example, after COVID, everyone started with this hybrid model wherein, you can work in the office for 2 days or 3 days and work at home for the next 2 days or vice versa, just a model that works well for them. But recently, in the past 6 months, what's happening is that organizations have started to call their employees in work again. So they've started to call them all 5 days or at least 4 days a week in the office because I don't know, there was this article that I was reading that this is happening because they're losing a lot of because of real estate, because they are anyways renting the office, but that's not been used to the point that they should. That's why they're starting to call their employees again. Anyways, that relationship between the employer and the employees is being hampered because of that, because employees were like, if it's a working mother and she was like, I'm doing the same job that I was doing from my house or the comfort of my house and taking care of my kid at the same time, because I'd not have to get extra help for childcare or have someone to take care of my child. I could have done that sitting at home easily, and I'm getting my work done as well. So why are you guys forcing me to come into work? And because of this, there were so many issues raised in, in that relationship, basically in the employee relationships. So this is one example how changes because of like outside changes are hampering that relationship. What employers did is they thought that, all right, because they're losing a lot of money, this, they're going to call their associates inside again. But eventually in the long run, they didn't understand that because they were providing that comfort, that is why the associates were there with them or working with them. And since that comfort's been taken, now they're going to look at, a company or an employer that actually gives them that support. So this is what we're going to look at in a nutshell. And how also managers have to understand where these employees, why are they saying this and where they come from. Sometimes, I feel people management is such an important skill because you need to be so versatile in your approaches. You can't just look like, all right, I am a single man. I don't have any other, worries in the world. So I'm just focused on my job. Yeah, everyone's going to be like me. No, that's not the case. Probably there's a working mother. There's someone who has family restrictions. There's someone who, just has been suffering from an illness or something. So there are a lot of things that they need to consider before making one little decision as well. So for this unit, obviously, we're going to understand that what influences that relationship. We spoke about this. And you're going to basically, in the end of it, understand, implications that's beyond the employee contract. So apart from what's listed down over there, what are the reasons why also, there's an impact in employee turnover or something. And what's going to happen is you're going to understand how, contingency theories that were put into place or problem solving abilities that take place are recognized and how professionally they are handled. And, again, I spoke about people management. So people management is such an important task. And that's the most important thing that takes place in employee relationships. Going through the LO1, just the indicative content, we're going to speak about how the role of outside bodies are going to impact that relationship. So globalization, international bodies, government, that's what's going to influence it basically. And also regarding the law and employee legislation, so contractual relationships, that is terms and conditions of employment and rights of obligations of employers and employees. Okay, I'm going to look at few of the laws and the collective employment law. So every country has their own employment law and specific things in place. And how we approach it and look at that is very difficult as well, because if it's a global organization, there are so many listed laws in the UK that don't apply in India. And there are so many listed laws in the US that, don't apply anywhere in the world. So we're going to look at a few of that as well, but we're going to look at that in the later units as well. So I'll take you through it slow by slow. Okay, I have a video for you, so I'm going to show that first, and then we're going to move on with the other part of all of these slides and all of this lecture. Just give me a second. Just going to start it from here because the first part is just an introduction, which we don't need. Let me know if you can't hear me. Hear the video, sorry.
Let's dive in. Employee relations is the term that defines the relationship between employers and employees. It covers the contractual, practical, physical, and emotional dimensions of the employer-employee relationship. Here are some examples of tasks that fall under employee relations management. Providing onboarding support for new hires. Find out what you can do to build a successful onboarding program in our previous learning bites. Addressing employee misconduct. Resolving conflicts. Good employee relations can help you improve employee engagement, boost productivity, and lower employee turnover. So how do you manage your employee relations? Here are 6 best practices that can help you get started. Communicate openly. Honest communication is the foundation of your relationship with your employees employees. You should share organizational updates regularly, inform employees about people leaving as soon as possible, encourage your employees to speak up or ask questions. Get your team behind your vision. This starts with frequently sharing and communicating the mission and vision of your company. This can help make people feel like they're a part of something bigger, and they do play an active role in achieving this common goal. Trust your people. In other words, don't micromanage. Once you've made sure that your employees know what they need to do, what's expected of them, and where they can find help, let them be. Trust that they will do a good job. Show recognition and appreciation. Showing you care and giving recognition are key to building strong employee relations. One way to do this is by incorporating public praise into your workplace. Here are a few ideas. Share appreciation and recognize milestones during regular team-wide meetings. Celebrate achievements across departments during company-wide meetings. Celebrate the little things that impact people's weeks by sending out emails or physical cards. Invest in your people. Building strong employee relations also means investing in them. This can be through formal training, peer mentoring, or employee wellness programs. The options here are endless and will depend greatly on the type of organization, industry, and budget. Don't have favorites. Create a work environment that truly enables all employees to participate and thrive. In other words, work towards an inclusive workplace where your employees won't feel like one is favored more than the other. That's it for employee relations. If you have more tips on building strong employee relations in the organization, feel free to share them in the comments below.
So I hope that video gave you a better idea on what employee relationships are and how they can be managed fairly and managed better, and few tips on how it essentially looks like in a working organization. So we're going to go through this as well. So basically, when you're looking at employee relationships, as I mentioned before, you need to manage people, and that's such an important skill, because you can't just look at one kind of a person and make all of the decisions. There's diversity in workforce, right? So you need to look at all diverse backgrounds and need to keep that in mind before you make your decisions to manage employees. You have, there are so many different working practices. So I'll give you a very simple example. In my previous organization, what exactly happened was I was on a full-time contract. My manager was on a flexible working contract. What is a flexible working contract? It essentially is that she worked 4 days. Her off day was Wednesday. What she did was she came into the office only 2 days out of those 4 days. That was a flexible working contract. Why did she have that? Because she actually had cancer, basically. So she suffered from that. So the organization changed their contract and made a flexible working contract that suited her needs. And that is how you don't be discriminatory, because, just because someone's suffering from an illness and, they need to go to a doctor's appointment every Wednesday, that doesn't mean they can't do their job correctly. Because what she did was, those 4 days that she was working, I was on a 40-hour contract, for example. She was on a 40-hour contract as well. Instead of working 8 hours every day, 5 days a week, she worked 10 hours. And she tried to cover up all the work, and she actually did a better job than most of people who just worked 5 days a week, right? So that's how companies come up with flexible working contracts. So if you're, having an event or an employee relationship event, what used to happen is this: to keep in mind that most of your associates that are working on a flexible working contract have a day off on Wednesday. So they used to avoid keeping different events on Wednesday, just because they understand that, there's a lot of different people coming from different backgrounds. If you're keeping an event, we need to make sure that it works out for everyone. So that's a very simple and straightforward example of an employee relationship module that I'm talking about, and how managers or people managers can make better decisions by just making few smaller changes. And then they also need to recognize that there are different kinds of firms that, so every firm has a different working style. We mentioned that in the previous unit as well. So if there's an IT firm, they might, have to just get on with the job, do everything, finish their tasks. They're very focused to just do their work, get that, and then go straight home. Whereas if it's a marketing department, it's a more relaxed and a more, an environment wherein there is people talking to each other, sharing ideas, they come up with new plans, they try different various things. So every company has a different working style, basically. In the same way, because of the size of the business, the working style changes as well. For example, there is small businesses written and multinational corporations. A small business would have a relaxed working style because they're like, all right, they just have 3-4 associates. Those 3-4 associates actually are part of this little family. So in terms of disciplinary policies or important, strict actions taken against associates, that's more relaxed in a family business module. Whereas if you're looking at a multinational corporation, they already have these various policies listed down and they need to follow it globally because, there has to be a consistency. That's how it's an MNC, right? An MNC would have a more strict disciplinary policy. For example, if you're taking way too many sick leaves than you actually are supposed to. So usually there are 20 odd days in a year that you can be sick. And if you've taken like way more than that, so they will put you through a disciplinary route, which essentially means that, all right, we feel that you're just taking sick leaves for no reason at this point. So unless you have a doctor's note or you have a report that says, all right, I was actually sick, we would have to just put you on a disciplinary procedure wherein we would have to take you through a process. So explain you why is it important to come into work, explain you the importance of what happens when you don't show up. There is so much, there's so much work that's delayed just because you're not in the office. So that's an entire process that takes place. And if they feel that the associate's still not improving, then it eventually would lead to termination of the employment. So that's one of a process that is handled in an MNC, right? Whereas firms in the gig and the sharing economy, do you know what a gig economy is by any chance?
No.
All right, no problem. So gig economy is a term that's, when you hear what it is, you'll be like, oh, this is basically a term that's used for people who trade in their skills and time for monetary value, basically. So an example would be a freelancer would come under a gig economy, or an independent contractor, or someone who essentially is charging you for their time. A photographer would come under gig economy. So that is all of the little firms that come under that economy. Then obviously you have managers that have the authority and power to manage that relationship, and they need to do a good job. So there's a fine line between managers managing people and managers being people's friends. And that's the line that they need to understand that they can't break. So managers cannot be your friends because that's not how it'll work. And managers cannot be some people who, associates are scared of as well, because even that wouldn't work. So there needs to be a right balance between, managing people. And that's such an important skill. I always keep saying this. All right, so we're going to go through analyzing how employment relationships in specific types of organization affects the development. So we're going to go through different types of organization. We have small businesses lined up, MNCs, the gig and the sharing economy. So as I mentioned, the small family business, it essentially is characterized by, by a familiar owner, a smaller management style. There are just few associates that are working in. It's a very relaxed environment that you're working in, essentially. So how does societal changes affect a small business model, right? It's going to affect us because, it's important to increase work-life balance, because in a small business, what happens is, because you're working towards your business. For example, if, your father is working towards, I don't know, come up with a business, like if they has a grocery shop, all right, and you're working with him and there are a few more people working with him, I feel the line between work-life balance gets blurred out, because they feel that, all right, they need to keep working so that they can keep getting returns. And because of that, they probably be like, usually we shut our store at 9, but since it's Friday, it's Saturday, it's Sunday, let's keep it open till 11, 12. You know, that's where they forget the balance that needs to be kept in place. So in such an environment, it's very important to stress that out, and also keep work, like, flexible working arrangements. If someone needs to go, see something, key, I need to get this sorted and then come back, give me an hour, give me a break in the middle. It's more relaxed in such a business model compared to an MNC trying to do the same. And employees basically accommodate to that model because that's how it's already working out for them. And since it's a small business, they adapt to that, and then they attract and retain talent. And then work context. So the nature of the work is basically based on how the family is thinking and where they come from. So, as it says here, the family values and the traditions. So that's how they categorize their work as well. So, in a specific business model, in a family business, there are certain things that they do in a specific way. Or, for example, if there's a family business in the UK that, it can be any kind of business, because it's a family business, and because amongst themselves, they speak in, if they want to speak in Punjabi, they speak in Punjabi. If they want to speak in Hindi, they speak in Hindi. But that works out for them, even though they're operating in the UK, because amongst themselves, the work's happening. So that's one example wherein they adapt to the culture or the style that the business is already working in. And your example is, loyalty and long-term commitment may be highly valued. So if someone's working in the family business for, say, 3-4 years, automatically the owner of that business, or, if, for example, my dad's working, and automatically my dad's going to have a sense of responsibility towards that guy who's coming in and working 3 years, he's like, all right, let's, can you do this for me? Can you get that? Can you run your, get this sorted, get that sorted? That's how the relationship is built as well. Then in an MNC, because an MNC is so huge and they need to globally take care of so many different areas of business, they need to manage everyone the same way and be fair. And they have to come up with different policies in place. Like, I mentioned the disciplinary policy and how it works out. So it's important for an MNC to have such things in place, because if they don't do that, the entire business model might crash down. For example, if in India, there's an associate who, has been sick for like 30, 40 days, there's no action taken. Whereas in the UK, if an associate is sick for like the same amount of days, there is action taken. That would create, and it wouldn't be fair to associates around the globe that they have. And associates would be like, why is there a discrimination between, both these different working styles? Just because it's different countries, but it's the same organization, so they have to have a same process. For example, an onboarding process that needs to be consistent throughout. So if, an associate is onboarded, the first round interview is taken, second round interview is taken, there's a background check that happens. And then once they're onboarded, there's a welcome hamper that they've given. Probably, it can have, I don't know, a bottle, a diary, a pen. So this is a consistent process that they follow throughout, because as an MNC, they have a reputation to hold as well, right? And getting, few things getting out of proportion in MNC and the business model crashing down is more likely to happen than in a small business. For example, if someone is unfairly treated at Google, that associate can very easily, put a lawsuit against them and be like, this is how I was unfairly treated. And that gets so out of proportion every single time in an MNC, because obviously everyone knows what Google is, right? In terms of work context, so obviously they have to accommodate all of these flexible working arrangement and remote arrangements. But they also need to keep in mind that they're working with different. So there's someone in India that's taking care of the IT work, whereas someone in the UK is trying to coordinate that to the US. How do you manage the time difference, right? He's probably, someone in India is going to be sleeping when, work starts in the US. So how do you do that? So managing and coming up with a consistent timing to get work done is also an important task that is a managerial task that takes place. and also affects how the, associates just interact with each other and also interact with the managers. And I would also say that in an MNC, they have a more formal work-life ethic, right? So they value the balance between work-life. I know that, countries in like India, for example, there is no work-life balance. Genuinely, there is no work-life balance. I've seen my dad working till what, 9, 10 in the night. There is literally no balance. Whereas a country in the US, actually not even US, in the UK, would actually have a proper work-life balance, which is 9 to 5. So it's the manager's responsibility, essentially, who is in India, to let his associates know that, okay, I think it's time. I think it's 6:37. Let's go home. Let's get this done tomorrow. Because as an MNC, you have a reputation to hold up, and that is the manager's responsibility to take care of that. So that's one of another example that takes care of work context, essentially. All right, coming to the firms in the gig and the sharing economy. So, you have, as I mentioned, freelancers are a part of the gig economy, and they have a very different kind of employment relationships. For them, it's very different because in terms of societal changes, they have so much flexibility because it's up to them. Okay. Being a freelancer, I feel, is honestly, the most important or the most stressful job, I would feel, because firstly, you don't have surety in terms of where you're getting your next paycheck from. And also, you are your boss. So if you don't push yourself, how are you going to get through with it? For example, a YouTuber. If I'm a YouTuber, just giving a very, very weird example, actually. It's my responsibility to record a video today and edit that video and post it. If I'm being lazy and I'm like, you know what, I don't feel like doing this today, I have a lot going on, I feel like I'm going to do it tomorrow and drag it, okay, it's going to just impact my paycheck at the end of the month, nobody else's. So it's my whole and sole responsibility to get done and my responsibility to push myself, right? So in terms of societal changes, they have a lot of flexibility and they need to make sure that they're getting their income properly. So for them, they obviously don't have a traditional job security, as I mentioned that, but they like the freedom that they have. Like, all right, I'm free today, I'm going to get work done. And also, most of them are doing something they're passionate about, because of which it also makes an impact. Because if you're passionate about something, you're going to make sure that you're doing the topmost job, the best job. For example, a tattoo artist, you know, since they're passionate about drawing and about, making sure that people are happy with what they have, they're going to put in their work. They're going to make sure they, approach, they might have, an Instagram page wherein people can find them. So that's something they need to do individually themselves. Coming to the work context of it, so they have different arrangements that are in place, and they obviously work based on projects. So if it's coming in, if, there might be, for example, a freelancer who is a videographer for a wedding planning company, just giving an example. There are so many weddings that take place in November and December. So they might have most of their profits in these 2-3 months. November, December, Jan are the months where people are getting married the most. Whereas in the later months, which is, the summer months, May or June, the rainy seasons, weddings are lesser. So they might have just 1 or 2 projects in a month. So it's, project to project basis. And because of which they also need to plan way ahead. So they need to keep savings. Okay, they need to keep, themselves to be secured. They need to keep a plan in place where, and all right, I have bookings every other day in the month of December, but in the month of June, I have like probably 2 bookings. So how am I going to manage that? So that is where a lot of, different challenges come up for themselves in place. Anyways, so what we spoke about, all these different 3 types of organization, how they adapt and how it impacts employee relationship, and also, how they have the flexibility in terms of getting their work done, and how they need to explain their issues to their employers or managers, essentially. For example, as I gave you an example of my manager in my previous job, if she wouldn't have discussed with her manager and explained to her manager that, all right, I love working, I love doing what I do, I don't want to stop working, but I obviously suffer from a health condition that because of which I need to go to, the doctors every Wednesday. If she wouldn't have communicated that and just been like, you know what, I don't think she'll understand. I think I should just change my doctor's appointment. I think, that would essentially hamper her health in the process, her not just physical health, also mental health, and also cause so much stress. And she probably might not be able to do a good job that she is doing in the organization because she's been so stressed out and getting her, her appointment sorted. So that's just one example wherein communication is so important to make sure that there's a proper relationship between managers and associates. Now we're going to just examine the fundamentals of employment law as applied to specific organization examples, and also consider the legal aspects that govern the employee relationships between different types of organizations. So again, we're going to look at the types of organizations that we looked previously. So for small family businesses, in terms of contractual relationships, they essentially, if, coming to a small family business, I wouldn't say every small business has a proper contract in place compared to an MNC, for example. They rely on mainly, I would say, just explaining them, all right, this is your task, these are your hours, probably pay you hourly. They come up with a mutual understanding mainly. So they don't usually have a proper contract or a proper signature in place. All right, you need to work with us for the first 5 months, or you cannot leave, or you're on probation for the first 6 months. I don't think that always happens in a small family business. And in terms of employment laws, have you heard of what unions are or what employee representative groups are? All right, I'm going to take that as a no problem. So what is an employee union or a representative group? It essentially means in an MNC, for example, there are so many associates, and there are these unions wherein they work independently, or independent bodies, that if, for example, an associate feels that their manager treated them unfairly, that I had a very bad experience, I was pregnant and she did not let me go to a doctor's appointment, and she said that, you cannot leave because of whatever reason, or I'm not going to accommodate your flexible working request. And I felt that that was unfair because, as a pregnant lady, my priority is obviously my child. They go to the unions, and what happens is the unions fight for them. So there's a proper case that happens, there's a hearing in place, and the unions come to rescue these associates that have been unfairly treated, basically, and usually takes place in bigger organizations, not in smaller ones. So for example, in a family business, they might not even have a union or a representative group. However, they still need to comply with the basic employment regulations. Like in the UK, you have a basic minimum wage rate. So it depends on your age, but if you're 24, 25, you would get around £11 an hour, and that's the minimum wage rate that they give, and that the associate has to earn basically as per that age. And also in terms of working hours, you can't aimlessly make them work 12, 13 hours a day without giving any breaks. After 6 hours, it's contractually important to give your associates a 20-minute break. It can be within those 6 hours or after those 6 hours, but it's important to get that. And also take care of health and safety issues. So, if they're working in a factory, they need to be given the proper safety equipment to do that. But yeah, they wouldn't have proper unions and representative groups as a small family business. And complying with the medical leave, with family and medical leave. So basically, associates get a specific number of leaves, or, to So they have paid leaves as well as unpaid sick leaves. So in terms of paid sick leaves, they obviously have, I think it's a 20-odd day that they have, but they also can take 12 weeks of unpaid sick leave, but it depends country to country. And it also depends on the type of, medical condition that you're suffering. If you're just suffering from a cold, you obviously can't take 12 weeks of unpaid leave. But yeah, so in a small family business, they have to adhere with specific, leaves in place, but not strictly follow to the T. For example, if an associate is falling sick or needs to go for a doctor's appointment, it'll be a more relaxed environment when I'm like, all right, you want to go for an hour and then come back. Not compared to an MNC, basically, which we're going to see now. So an MNC needs to keep international labor regulations in place because they have different countries that are working in and associates from different countries. So need to make sure that that's fair and practiced fairly throughout, globally, and also have decent working conditions all across the borders. Whereas in terms of adhering to the different laws, they have different laws in place which they need to follow. And it's more important for them to follow because they have a standard and a reputation to hold as well. Whereas cross-border contracts and immigration law, for example, I am from India, but I'm working in the UK. So my company needs to make sure that I have a legal, work permit, that I can actually work in this country legally, so that they're not illegally hiring associates. So it's important for them to check the immigration laws and understand everything in detail for it to work. In terms of a gig and sharing economy, what essentially happens is, because they are so independent, they are not essentially employees. If they're working for an organization, they're not their employees of the organization, because they're just, as is meant, they are independent contractors essentially, right? And that's what makes a difference, because they need to manage their own tax, they need to manage their own everything. It says benefits over here, which gives me a good example. In terms of benefits, like if you're working in an MNC, there are different benefits apart from your simple paycheck that you get. You have health benefits that come up, wherein, if you fall sick, there's a family cover in place. There's like different insurance covers that they help you with. If, you want to go for traveling, you have a travel insurance that they provide as well. And, it can be mental health benefits. Like I gave an example in the previous unit, wherein a company had an app that had mental health specialists in it, and you could book through it. So that was an additional benefit that the organization was offering. They didn't have to, associates would still come and work even if they didn't. But it just makes associates just feel a sense of comfort and safety that, all right, this organization takes care of me. So in terms of benefits in a gig economy or a sharing economy, they don't really have that. They cannot enjoy any of the benefits that are offered by the employees because, employers, because they're not an employee of the organization, essentially. They take care of their own everything. Whereas labor rights and benefits, sorry, give me a second, just need to have some water. All right, coming to the employee rights and benefits. So obviously, employment laws need to be considered when someone who is, a freelancer that's coming in and working. But at the same time, they are in charge of taking care of most of the things on their end, right? So they don't have any specific, benefits, but they do have access to the basic things in terms of if they have an problem going on, then they are classified under freelancing workers, and that's taken up by the union if they have to. But as a whole, they don't really have any specific laws that are in place for them. And then again, legally, they are in charge of taking care of the obligations, and they have to make sure that they are properly taking care of their working rights as well. So if they feel that, this is a not so great working condition, so they have the anonymity to basically make the choice if they want to go ahead with it or not. Then moving on, you have, we went through all of these aspects and how laws, how these different laws are adhered internationally, as well as, taking care of, the different immigration rules that I mentioned, and work permits. So there's a lot that goes on the back end part of it when you're looking at employee relationships. Now we're going to just go through how developments in the society impacts, and the context of employee relationships require an in-depth examination of various factors that influence relationships. So there are so many factors that affect employee relationships. We already spoke through so much, but also we can speak about what can have. They can have a positive or a negative effect. So let's go through this and see. So sorry about that. Work-life balance. Okay. So since everyone is so, emphasizing on a good work-life balance now, and I feel that's so important as well. Having a proper work-life balance is so important because, yeah, you are going and spending your 8 hours or 9 hours at work. You want to spend the rest hour with your family. You are essentially working for your family, right? So why wouldn't you want to spend quality time with them as well? So nowadays, coming up with flexible working arrangements, like I mentioned, a working arrangement, if you're a new mother and you want to take care of your kid, so you can work from home, you're getting your job done. It's not hampering your job. And remote work is such a big thing that's come up now, because especially after COVID, everyone's like, if I can do it from the comfort of my house, why am I traveling in traffic and spending, fuel and extra time to get to work, to do the same thing in uncomfortable clothes? So work-life balance has had a positive impact on employee relationships because managers also understand, or employers also understand, that if the work is taking place, it doesn't matter how is it happening as long as it's getting done. And they are focusing on, employees being satisfied and also on, well-being of their associates. But on the other hand, it also has different challenges for employers. As in the previous unit, we mentioned it's so difficult to manage associates who are working from home or remote working. And it's so difficult to engage associates as well. An associate who's working remotely and has never come in the office, engaging them to, the different activities at work is an additional task, because they essentially are like, all right, I'm getting my work done, I'm done with it. Why am I putting additional hours for, let's say a Christmas event? Like, how's that going to help me? I'm never going to see these people again. I'm never going to go into office. So it gets difficult in terms of HR to keep getting them engaged, essentially. And then diversity and inclusivity. There's so much, like nowadays, diversity is so big, like people from different backgrounds, yes, consider them. Someone from India might have way more skills, might not, possess all of the skills, but they have such potential that they can do such wonders. So people getting hired in such job roles is just getting increased. And there's an open environment wherein, yeah, okay, you can come in, you're coming from Nigeria, fair enough, apply and see how because they have such a good work ethic over there. So essentially it helps in a positive work, employment relationships. However, as HR, it's so challenging to manage people from different backgrounds, because, for example, I just want to come up with a good example. Diwali, okay? Not everyone knows what Diwali is, why you celebrate it, or say Eid, okay? They want to have all of the different celebrations in place because they don't want to, be like, why didn't this company do something for Eid, whereas they had such a big celebration for Diwali? Or in the UK, for example, they had such a big celebration for Christmas, but they did nothing when it was Eid. So why? So these are the questions that come up. And I'm giving you a very simple example. In terms of managing diversity, there's so much else that comes in, because people coming from different backgrounds, they have a different working style. People coming from different backgrounds, they, the accents are so different. It's so difficult for me sometimes to understand someone who's come up from, from Africa side, because their accent is a very strong accent, right? So how do they not just manage that, but also make sure that if you put in these 10 people together from different backgrounds, is it going to work or is that going to crash? It's so important for HR to keep that in mind. That's why when you're hiring, one of the hiring strategies, they keep in, diversity in place, wherein, is it going to work? There are some companies that only hire associates if they feel that they're going to work well in the organization. In a sense, when you come in this little jar I was mentioning in the previous unit, if there's a jar of blue candy and I put a red candy in it, how would that mix work? And would it even work, or would it just, all the flavors get mixed up? Like, how does it work? So it's HR's responsibility to keep sure that all of that is smoothly done. And then ethical behaviors. So obviously there are different ethical behaviors that are supposed to be followed. And, there is, I mentioned in previous unit again, we have the CSR that different companies come up with, wherein if you are worried about the environment, the CSR people are going to take that in place and keep that in check and be like, all right, you know what, let's actually do a cleanup run. Or if you're passionate about, different organizations have started to do these pride festivals wherein they're keeping the LGBTQ community in mind and doing pride festival, which might be such a small thing, but for the people from that community is such a big thing. So how can CSR help to do that? And as a positive, it's a good thing because, it helps in the organization's reputation. But as a negative, it makes so many changes in the organization's practices and decision-making policy. Then impact of work context developments. Just going to quickly go through this as well. What is essentially meaning is that because of the changes in, for example, advances in technology, because of so many technological advancements, there are different things that have come up, like remote working is so easy now because, click of a button, you can get a meeting done. Click of a button, you can actually monitor your employees as well. So, and they're making sure that you're using these platforms correctly. So sometimes what happens is you don't know if that specific app or that specific change in technology is helping associates or not. For example, just giving you a very simple example, in terms of employee well-being, an associate who might be 45 or 50 years old, and there's a new technological advancement that's come up in the organization wherein all of them need to, check in through an app or an application system. And there's a process that have different steps in the app that you need to follow to make sure that you're registered onto a portal. Just give me a very simple example. So someone who is probably in their mid-20s and 30s, might be more easy for them to adapt to that or adapt to that change. All right, this is where I need to go in the app. This is how I need to do it. It's more easy for them to navigate that. Or, if they want to put in leaves, they need to do it through that app, right? So it's easier for someone who is probably in their 20s, 30s to manage that. But someone who's in their 40s, 50s, or even 60s, if they're working in an organization, how do you make sure that that works well for them as well? Because as an associate who's probably, 57, he's going to be like, I don't know how to use this app. But at the same time, I'm so scared to ask for help because they feel like they're going to bother people by asking the same thing again. Or they might feel stupid that, all right, everyone knows it, why don't I? So it might play with their well-being. So this is a very simple and generic example that I give. But if you take it in an actual important perspective, in a scale which is, impacting associates and mentally affecting them, it makes it so important that because of advances in technology, yeah, there are positives, but we need to also make sure that we take care of the negatives in mind. Then we have flexible working arrangements. Of course, as we mentioned above, really good. It helps the business. It caters to the individual needs. But at the same time, because if there's not a proper flexible working contract in place, or if the employer doesn't accept that all right, yeah, you're sick, but I'm not going to make any flexible arrangements for you. So they might feel that their job is at stake now because now they've told their associates their managers that, all right, I am sick, for example, and I need help. So the manager is going to always keep that in mind, and they're going to think that, if they didn't do a task properly, that's because of their illness, but that probably isn't the case. Then power dynamics and management style. So obviously it depends on every organization on how their management style is important. But again, managing people is such an important task. They need to make sure that the associates have that autonomy in, getting their work done for job satisfaction and also for creativity. You can't always have a dictatorship module in place because that's never going to work out well. So you need to make sure that, yeah, you're monitoring your associates, but at the same time, you're doing a job that, is giving them the creative credits as well, that all right, you can do it yourself and play around with it and then let me know how it works. We spoke about the gig and sharing economy already, how, there are different things that have come up with it, and it affects employment, how it affects employment relationships, because they're not essentially employees, but at the same time, they are working under you. So questions about, job security, working rights, everything comes up into place. So again, concluding, there are different impacts that these developments take place and how these positive and negative impacts affect the employers and the employees, and how they need to have a healthy balance so that they have a proper or a positive employee relationship between their associates. So now we're just going to go through creation of a positive employee relationship has been affected by developments in society and the work context. So it's again pretty repetitive. So as I mentioned in the start that, the rest part of it is going to be really quicker because we've already gone through everything. So again, coming back to flexibility and work-life balance, as we mentioned that, nowadays there are flexible working arrangements and people can work, in a balanced work-life balance style, and it's, helping the well-being. Then again, we spoke about inclusivity and diversity, how there are different people coming in from different backgrounds, and that impacts the workplace, but also helps in innovative ideas that come up. Then ethical behaviors. There are specific behaviors that are encouraged in an organization, and that is the managers of the organization's task to let the employee know and how it impacts employees essentially. So it can be a positive impact, because it can improve employee morale. So that's one of, the reasons why they have these in place. We spoke about advances in technology, how changes in technology can have a mixed impact on the organization. Again, flexible working arrangements. Then power dynamics and management style, how because of changes to the leadership or the management style in the organization, there can be a positive or a negative impact, because there might be one leader that, is really flexible in her approach. She's quite relaxed, whereas another leader might be, no, these are the rules that we need to follow and go through it. So that makes a very, different or impact in terms of managing people. And then gig and sharing economy. As we mentioned, they are working under us, but at the same time, they're not our employees. So it creates lack of job security, and obviously they don't have all of the benefits and employee rights. So it can be a negative impact, but at the same time, if it works out really well for them, it can be a positive one as well. But this one stresses on negative impact. Anyways, concluding this lecture, we spoke about what employee relationship is. We spoke about how, employee relationship means being fair, having a proper communication, effective communication between your leaders, and also how we need to make sure that we see or document employee action. So how are these changes affecting the employee actions or how they're behaving in the organization, and how the employee relationships, we can make a positive relationship between them and also balance it, because we looked at different kinds of economies, small businesses, MNCs, gig and sharing economies, how they can have a positive or a negative impact due to changes in the, society, outside world, also changes inside which take place internally. And then how all of these factors together takes care of the specific needs of the associates. So I hope everything in this module was learning outcome was clear for you. Unless you have any questions for me, I can end this lecture right here. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, do you have any questions at this point?
I'm not getting the firms and gig and sharing economy.
All right, no problem. We can go through that again. What part of that is not clear to you in
I'm
terms of
not
how they
what
work?
basic is.
Sorry?
I'm not getting what basically it is.
Oh, okay. All right, no problem. So I'll explain you what firms and sharing a gig economy is. So as I mentioned, inside the gig economy, you have different kinds of people working. So you can have a freelancer who is a photographer, a videographer, or someone who, someone who is freelancing doing nails. So there might be a lady who is just, coming in, or a salon lady who's just doing her nails, right? But I don't know if you've heard of um this app. I forgot the name of this app. So it essentially is a big app wherein you can book salon appointments and they will come home to you. Urban Clap, have you heard of Urban Clap?
No.
Okay, no problem. All right, I'll explain you the module. So what essentially it does is, let me give you another example. Uber, right? What happens in Uber is there are independent drivers, yeah, that drive cars, but they are registered on the Uber app, correct?
Yeah.
So you can be, for example, I have a car, okay, and I can go on the app and be like, I want to register as an Uber driver. I'm an
Okay.
independent person. I can work even independently and just, use my car as a taxi, being like, anyone standing on the road wants my taxi service. But I choose to go through Uber. So I am an individual that makes money, but at the same time, I am registering under a business module. So I can do that same task alone, but I am deciding to go through Uber to do that task. So basically, Uber is going to pay me. Uber is going to give me my paychecks at the end of the month, yeah, or at the end of every ride. But I'm still an individual independent contractor because I can do that task alone as well. So, for example, if I'm not getting any bookings on Uber, or I'm not getting anyone who is asking for a cab on Uber, if I see someone standing on the street, I can shut my Uber app and be like, okay, where do you want to go? I'll take you, right?
Okay.
So that is what an independent contractor or a gig economy looks like. And a sharing economy basically is wherein they have these assets, like, for example, in the UK there's this thing wherein it goes, if I have a big house, yeah, I have a spare room in that house. What they usually do is they rent that house. So that's
Okay.
the sharing economy that comes into place, that I have unused assets, but I'm using that. So to share that room, okay, to share that room in my house, I can go around and ask people that, I have extra room. Is anyone interested? Or in, I can go in my work and be like, is anyone interested? I have a spare room. But we have this app in the UK that is called Spare Room, essentially, wherein I can put my listing over there as well. So essentially, Spare Room is helping connect people. But at the end of the day, when someone's coming to my house, I'm not paying just Spare Room for that. Yeah, they got a part of it in the start when I put my ad, but at the end, I am the one getting the money, right? For example, in Uber case, Uber takes like a share or a percentage of your ride, but at the end of the day, the driver is the one who's getting all of the money for that trip, right?
All
Does
right.
make more sense, or did I confuse you more?
No, no. I got it now.
Perfect. So that's what essentially it looks like. Like a videographer for a wedding, they might get booked on through a specific app, or you found them online, but essentially they are the ones doing all of the tasks, and they are the ones in charge of their well-being. They need to, if they're climbing on a chair to take a video, they are wholly responsible for their camera. If it falls down, the company is not going to pay for it. Does that make sense? Like in Uber's case, if there's an accident that happened, Uber is not gonna compensate the driver because of an accident that happened, because it was the driver's fault and that's his car.
Okay.
So that's how they don't have all of the benefits, but yeah, they are registered under the Uber app.
All right.
But if we went through an independent contractor, like, I'm just a driver, I don't have a car, I'm using a company's car essentially. So if there was any damage to the car, the company would have taken care of it, right?
Yeah.
So that is what a gig economy essentially means.
All right.
No problem. I'm glad that I just cleared that out for you. Do you have any other questions?
No.
No problem at all. So again, thank you so much for attending today's lecture and thank you for your time. I will see you tomorrow again at the same time. Yeah.
All right.
Take care. Have a nice day. Bye.
Bye.